Welcome to the Beats and Balance podcast, a space for conversations at the intersection of creativity, healing, and community. Each week, we sit down with artists, healers, and everyday people to explore stories of transformation, resilience, and the ways we use creativity to survive and thrive.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Beats and Balance podcast. Today's guest is LP, founder and managing director of Houstory, a platform bringing transparency to the rental market. After a decade-long career in HR with the City of New York and Columbia University, LP's own rental nightmares in New York City and later helping friends in Baltimore sparked the idea for Houstory. Now based in Maryland, she's building tools that give renters verified insights into units, from landlord responsiveness to maintenance issues and neighborhood red flags. At its core, Houstory is about equity and empowerment, helping renters make informed choices instead of renting in the dark. I think this is a tool that we all super are grateful for, because I think many of us have had some rental nightmares. So thank you so much for being on the show, LP. I appreciate you coming on and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
For sure. So let's just dive into it. Tell us a little bit about you, your background, the years you spent working in HR, and how that kind of shaped what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Queens in New York City, and I always make the joke that I don't sound like I'm from Queens, except for a couple of words. So like water, I definitely sound like I'm from New York. I fell into HR. I was working initially as a program director of an after school, working with at-risk elementary age youth. And then I left that job to do a sales job because I thought that I needed to get better at talking to people in different scenarios. And my boss at the time thought I'd be really great for recruiting. And I transitioned to recruiting, and then I never looked back. And so a lot of my HR experience has been recruiting, building orgs, and just going from there. And the same theme of people has been present throughout my entire career. You know, looking at Houstory and looking at renting, it's very similar to like a lot of organizations. And, you know, the same problems that we face at work is the same problem that we face trying to find a place to live. And it's like issues of like discrimination, you know, not getting the right information, people not being transparent. And that was something that always bothered me, the lack of transparency.
Yeah, I always felt like there was like inequality in the way that, like, when you go to apply for an apartment, they're doing full background checks and they want to know everything about you, but you have no idea what you're going into. You just have to hope that the landlord or the leasing company is being honest about the state of the apartment, and then if it's not, you're kind of just screwed. I lived in New York and Brooklyn and Flatbush in a really old building and dealt with a lot of things. So I know the struggle is super real.
Yeah, I can only imagine because, you know, I've moved around a lot. I'm from a place called Belrose, Queens, which might not mean anything for most people, but that's at the outskirts of Queens and Long Island. So I used to take the LIRR just to get into the Manhattan.
Like the suburbs.
The suburbs of New York. And so I moved around a lot before settling on my place in Crown Heights. And I was there about 5 years before I relocated down here. And it was just, you know, you would pay the apartment fees, you would pay the broker fee, there's all these fees, and then there's no guarantee of any safety. And then there's always the random threat that the landlord can push you out. And especially if you're working 2-3 jobs, like a lot of people I know are, you don't really have time to, when you're looking for a new place, to do your due diligence. And then if you run into an issue at the place that you're currently in, it's like, what resources do you have? There's so much misinformation out there, and you're just scared because this is like your home.
True. It really puts you in like a power dynamic that is unfair. So I really love what you are doing with Houstory. For people that haven't heard of it before, tell them like exactly how it works and how it's helping renters.
Yeah, for sure. So it's currently not launched right now. So many people haven't heard about it yet because we're still currently building the app. I'm in the phase where I'm conducting interviews and meeting people, making sure that I'm building something that people will actually use. And so the way the app works, think of it almost like a Yelp or a Carfax or a Glassdoor for renters. And during my time working for the district attorney's office, I would go down to the complaint room, and the complaint room is where any sort of cases come in from police or what have you. And that's where everything goes before it goes to the different areas. I started noticing patterns where I would see these LLCs for apartment complexes come in. And I was like, that's interesting. I wonder if the people of this building know that this name keeps popping up as a name that's a slumlord, right? Someone that's, continuously violating and not making the changes. And then finding out that, at the time in the Bronx, that a lot of folks living in these places had a legal housing. And so they were scared of losing that, and they were scared of complaining. So they didn't complain. So they lived in these areas that weren't that great. And then there would be all these other issues that would pop up, that would just keep popping up. The same addresses would keep popping up. And it's like, is it really these renters' fault, or should we do something about these predatory landlords? And I'm not sure how familiar you are about New York City, but there was a time in the 70s where landlords, particularly in the Bronx, would burn down buildings to get the insurance payouts instead of renting to people. And so we still have different variations of those problems that are around. So I'm just essentially working with a lot of the data that's already out there and trying to make it in a way that is understandable for folks and convenient for them, especially if they're, going from job to job, picking up the kids from daycare. It's just, the premise of it is just to make it easier for them to get this info.
No, 100%. Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with New York. I'm originally from New York, from upstate New York, but I lived in the Bronx. I lived in Brooklyn, Jersey, DC. Like my mom and I used to joke when I was little that the murder the murder capital was like following us. Like everywhere we moved to, the city would be the next. Like we were like hopping from hood to hood. But what I realized growing up in that situation and then leaving, and the kind of judgments that people have, is that, they put the onus on the people that live in those areas, but they don't realize that those areas are neglected intentionally. And like the people that live there have no control. Like you said, a lot of people are afraid to complain. There's a lot of intimidation. I'm dealing with a situation right now in Philly where I'm just like, man, I feel like these dudes are connected to the mob. I don't know how much I don't know how much I want to push back. But we fighting right now. So yeah, I understand. I think that it's a not just like a helpful resource in terms of being like, okay, like people can leave reviews, but it also is helpful in like putting power back in people who have been disenfranchised and are living in these conditions at no fault of their own. It really is on the landlords that just don't care.
Yeah, and sometimes even goes beyond landlords. Sometimes it's realtors or management companies, especially for small mom and pop landlords that own like one or two properties that they inherited. And it's like, how do you navigate this whole system? The thing that I thought was the craziest, and this doesn't particularly have to do with renting, but when I was running my after school program, we were housed in a New York City school, and we had an inspector come, and the inspector would make sure that like the place was safe for the children to be there. And these children, just for context, were there during the morning, and during the afternoon, they would be in the same classrooms. The inspector came and started dinging the program for lead paint and paint chipping on the walls. And I said to them, and I was like, this is literally deemed an at-risk neighborhood. There's lead paints on the walls. These buildings have been around since the 40s or 50s. And I was like, how can we ever like move past that if the buildings that the kids are in all day that we're renting from New York City, are this way? Like, what do you expect me to do? Get up there and start painting myself? I don't know what I'm doing.
No, 100%. And there's all types of health issues and long-term effects of all of those things. So yeah, it can be a real, like you said, like a nightmare. So let's talk a little bit about how you made the jump from doing HR to doing tech entrepreneurship. It's a pretty big shift. And also like a lot of people, I feel like, would have some fear around like going from something so structured to now you're kind of like in control and on your own and making your own schedule and things like that. So how has that shift been for you?
Yeah, it's been an interesting one. I don't think that I would have made it right now if the circumstances didn't align and I didn't have support to be able to do that. I told you I grew up in New York City. Both my parents are city workers, and they come from, like a lot of other Black Americans, from a long legacy of find your area and try to stay strong, keep your head down, like, get a good job, stay in a job. It's all about survival.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a neighborhood where some of my peers didn't have that same upbringing. So I was just like, well, why do I need to survive when they're taught to thrive?
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that really bothered me.
Yep.
And then I found out last year officially that I had ADHD, which explains why my work history, even though it's been very structured, all of the roles that I had were very flexible. There were some roles that had me moving from site to site to site several times in a week. And people thought it was crazy that I would sign up to do that, but I thought it was exciting. I had roles, especially the one at Columbia, where I didn't know what type of problem was going to come across my desk because I was, coaching all these HR leaders throughout the university. And it's like, it could have been anything. And I was just excited about that. But I think the biggest reason why I switched from working in human resources to building my own thing was I felt that this was something that has been sitting on my soul for a really long time. I came up with the idea in 2012.
Oh, wow.
My first business plan in 2013. And I was just like, I wanted to find a pathway forward. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do that. And HR is interesting, but it was never really my passion. My passion was in people, and I don't have to do people through HR. And I think that was the lesson that I learned, working at a place that wasn't particularly very healthy. And I realized that after some time, that saying, I like working with people. I don't know if human resources is the best place to me right now, given this thing has been sitting on my soul for a really long time.
Yeah. I love that it's something that you started way back and you didn't rush to do it. You kind of let divine timing take place. And, I think that's super cool because I think a lot of people feel like they can't go back or can't work on something that they dreamed about. And there's proof right here that you can. And it's still a need. Like, it's like, I don't know anybody else that's doing this. And I think that it's something that people probably would have wanted for a long time. So I'm sure you're going to be super successful. What has been some of the challenges and some of the pluses to starting your own business?
So I think some of the challenges for me is the lack of structure. I think that's the hardest part. And you're constantly second guessing yourself. So I primarily work on my own for most of the day-to-day work. And I work in my home. And so it's, I'm not getting that stimulus of working with other people, bouncing ideas off. And then I'll come up with something and I'm not sure if it's good and I'll share it with a friend, but the friend doesn't have the full context. When you're at work, there's some context about what you're doing so people can, help guide you to the best path forward. Here, it's almost like you're on your own for everything. And that could be kind of scary.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that is the most frustrating, and then when you do come up with a plan to move forward, you're wondering how much time and energy do I put into this? Because I don't know if this is the right path. Yeah. And so that's something that I think is probably a challenge.
I feel like you're reading my mind. I say these things to myself all the time. So yeah, it's real. I think a lot of people will resonate that are trying to be entrepreneurs out here.
Yeah. I mean, that's the tough part about it. And then the positive, I left a really toxic work situation and I've been focused, especially the first couple of months of this year, just focused on healing and inviting, I have a couple of people that are consulting or doing ad hoc work with Houstory, and I'm only inviting those into the space that match my values. One of them being transparency and community. And that's been really helpful and really inspiring. And then I've been following a lot of really great entrepreneurs that are doing exactly what I'm doing, that have been through situations and are just trying to make it work. And that's been really exciting being able to do that. So I've just been really happy just to be networking with people, being around people that share those values, and then just focusing on my mental health and figuring out how can I be the best version of myself.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's one of the reasons that this podcast was started, because I think I was in a similar situation where I left a really toxic job and then I was just kind of isolated on my own. And then you start thinking oh, this is a great idea. And then you start thinking wait, am I just losing my mind here because I'm by myself and everything I think is a great idea? But in doing this podcast, one of the things that's been really cool is that everybody that I've met, and it's been people from like all over, have been sharing kind of the similar path stories, people that are already like well established in their careers and their endeavors, and also people that are just starting out. And it feels like it's like the universe being like, all right, see, like you are on the right path, because like everybody is like talking about the same kind of like fears and doubts, but then also the same kind of joys, where it's like it's terrifying to start doing your own thing, but once you kind of take that leap of faith and you find that you're caught, that feeling is like something you can't really describe, where it's just like you feel free, especially like if you come from years of working in toxicity, which I think a lot of us, especially people of color, working in the United States can drain the hell out of you for many reasons.
Yeah.
So it's a give and take. Like, you know, it's like, do you want freedom? But then also the stress of being like, it's really just you out here. So I feel like I'm always like super in awe of people that make that jump, because it's terrifying. Like it really, it really is easy to be like, you know what, this is too much. I'm going to go back and get a 9 to 5. So I salute you for that, for sure. Let's talk about looking ahead. What are you seeing for yourself in the next few years with Houstory and with whatever other like goals and dreams you have?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to tell you a story about when I was in class for my master's. This is the last class. It was called Navigating the Future Work. And we were given an assignment to build the ideal workplace and describe the ideal boss that we wanted. And I went up to one of the TAs and I said really seriously to him, "How dare you?" He got kind of scared. He looked kind of scared. His eyes got all wide. And I said, "How dare you assume I want a boss?" And I said, I never liked the idea of somebody having control over every aspect of my day. I don't like the idea of somebody being able to control my career with a couple of words. Because, you know, when you have that type of power, it's easy to corrupt. And especially someone that is neurodivergent, I didn't like how that was set up, because it didn't seem fair. Like I felt like it was like I was always gonna lose. So I told them my ideal workplace would be one of mentorship. I made a joke the other day about why I don't call myself CEO. And I said I have my own ideas about capitalism and my own ideas about the title of CEO. And I think most people slap that title on without, you know, and it kind of shows a little bit of like narcissism. And I was like, I don't know if I want that. And I said, managing director, I feel like at this point where I'm at makes the most sense. And then maybe CEO would be in my future. I'm not sure. But what I see more is I'm inviting a team of really strong, capable people that have similar values, that are passionate about the work that they do, and that want to come together in a workplace that is people focused. And that's something that's really important to me. And so I was talking to a couple of the, you know, contractors that I'm working with, and I said, okay, so maybe we'll do a monthly in-person meeting, but our hours are flexible. And I don't want like a former boss, you know, subordinate relationship. I want it to be based off that of mentorship. And I think that can work. I feel like we've seen instances in the workplace where that's worked. And I want to emulate that for sure.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I'm a Libra and also neurodivergent, so like the justice aspect of it like pisses me off too. I think that's why I've not been able to function in corporate spaces, because it becomes like an ego trip, control, power game, as opposed to like you're doing a good job and like you're doing your job, and that's fine. It just becomes like something completely separate from that. And that, yeah, I think that was the biggest jump for me too. Was like, no, like I can't continue to work in spaces that have no sense of morality. And I came from like working in nonprofit, so it's like you people are preaching one thing and acting completely like you're Trump Jr. back here,
or worse.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are you saying to people in the public versus how you act behind closed doors? Like that would just, I couldn't tolerate it, like on a soul level. So I deeply feel what you're saying. But I think that's the thing, like you have to kind of be the change you want to be. And like by starting your own thing, it allows you to shape your workspace the way that you see fit and it sounds like you're putting a lot of intention into the way that you're setting up the energy of the space, not just like, how you want your systems to work and flow, but the type of people and energy that you want around. And I
Yeah,
think
for
that makes a world of difference. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a conversation I had with somebody. I don't want to. I'm trying to like not mention the workplace, but there was a conversation I had with somebody where this individual had these sort of internal guidelines that he wanted everyone in the company to follow, and would preach it in public and would hold people accountable, like would let people go according to that. And then was telling me a story about his children and how he was disciplining his children and how he took pleasure in denying touch, affection, and love
Oh,
for one of
God.
his kids, and would only give them food and water, but would ignore them. And when he told me this story, and I was just like, and someone that worked with children and is extremely empathetic, and I was like, okay, like I get some people that don't like kids, and I get that, but like for you to preach all of these things here and then in your own home to ignore your child because they misbehaved in school. And by the way, it was mild in compared to what I've seen
Yeah.
working with kids. And it just like, I just didn't understand the disconnect and how things can be so different. And that also was amplified in my work because I used to tell people I didn't like to lie, but when you're head of HR, or when you're the HR person that's in the investigation, it
Yeah.
is such a fine line where it's like, there's so much I can't say. I'm thrown into the fire having to figure things out. And I think that the one thing that's been consistent throughout my journey is I've always had employees applaud me for making them feel like human and treating like a human being and telling them, listen, I don't have good news. We're going to have to let you go. And these are the reasons why. But here are some resources that can help you land back on your feet, and always trying to bring the humanity back.
Yeah.
It would always take extra time, but and then even with this last company I was working with the massive layoffs, like people were reaching out to me and I was like giving them resources because I'm just like, I'm sorry this happened to you, but here are 10 people I know that are recruiters that can help you get another job. And I was like, that's what we should be doing for people. We should be, when we have to terminate them, like, or discipline them, just like remembering that they're still people.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think that's something that's missing definitely from corporate spaces. Like I've had issues with going to HR and feeling completely like their just only job is to prevent the company from getting sued. And no part of it was like human resources. Like they didn't look at me as a human. There was no resources. It was just like, how can we prevent you from suing us? Because we know we fucked up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's disheartening because you go in thinking one thing, like, oh, this person's here for me. And it's like, no, not at all. So I think that's really great, keeping the empathy, because that's what it should be, right? Like that people need resources, and the way that this country is set up, like you need a job to survive, and jobs really don't act like that. Like they let you go and they're just like, all right, like you got 10 kids to feed. I don't care. Which is why we have the situation that we have where everybody's really struggling. So I think that's really dope. What would you say for the people that are struggling right now with housing? Do you have any advice that you'd want them to hear? Or if there's a magic wand and you could change anything about the rental market right now, what would you do?
Well, in terms of advice, I would say always look up your city or your local ordinance's resources. You'll be surprised how much support is buried in there.
Mm,
And I know that it could be really difficult to navigate through that. I mean, at one point, I would love if Houstory can have a program that can help people navigate it, almost like an advocate, like a health advocate would navigate your medical journey with you. I want to see if Houstory will be able to do that. But I know in New York City and in Baltimore, there are tons of resources. They just don't have the capacity to advertise. So go to your housing website, look there. There's so many guides that are there. There are housing attorneys and pro bono lawyers a lot of times that can also help.
mm-hmm.
As a queer person myself, I've reached out to LGBT centers. They also have folks that are there, and they'll help everyone regardless of how you identify. And there's so many people there that are just trying to help. And then in terms of your second question, which I believe is, what
Magic
do I wish
wand.
was different?
Yeah.
I think transparency, like I had a nightmare rental story that sparked I wouldn't say it sparked my Houstory dream, but it definitely solidified that something was wrong. It was like when I moved into a place and every week there was another issue, and it was just compounded issues. It went from, being roaches to being a ton of roaches to ticks to
Wow.
the door you can open from the outside, even if you lock it from the inside, because it was busted down by the police because the previous tenant was a drug dealer that the management company was ready to evict people, including the maintenance guy's family. When he passed away due to cancer, they were ready to kick out his wife and his kids. Before he was buried in the ground. And it was things like that kept happening. I was like, oh my God, this is such a terrible place. And then they send me a notice to renewal. I was like, why? So I think the biggest thing is just transparency. It's, you'll be surprised, if you're transparent, people are willing to put up with more because at least they know what to expect. But the lack of transparency, you just feel like you're being bamboozled. And then it just gets worse from there.
No, 100%. What do you have going on, if anything, that you want to plug or tell people about, or where can they find more about Houstory? And, I guess, do you have a notification or email that they can sign up for to know when you launch officially?
So I'm currently working on that. We do have a website. It is under construction. So, but I've been really ramping up on social media. Okay. So you can follow me on Instagram, Houstory app. On TikTok, also at Houstory app, and then on Facebook. And I've been posting my rental series, and I've also been conducting rental story interviews. So I'm reaching out to folks and interviewing them on camera and also in text. I'm going to be sharing some of these stories, but we will have a sign-up page soon for folks that are interested. We do plan on launching in New York City and Baltimore first, and then moving out to other cities. From there.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I think the key thing, I guess we touched on a little bit from before. So the reason why I'm choosing New York City and Baltimore particularly is the history of redlining and the current gentrification and how it's pushing out Black and brown bodies. You made a comment earlier about when your family moved, it's you also moved to a place that had high crime rates. And that is a story that is typical of a lot of people. And New York City is the largest legally segregated city in the US. And it's that way for a reason in redlining. And so these people were pushed to different areas. And now that these other areas are getting more desirable because rents are increasing, they're kicking people out. I had a friend text me earlier today asking, oh, is Brownsville, New York safe? And I laughed and I said, no, but
stay away.
It's getting safer. I used to not want to walk there in the daytime. Now you could probably walk there in the daytime. Things are changing, but that's not always for the best. They're bringing these innovations, lowering pollution in Manhattan with these taxes, but with these, I forget what they call them, the when you drive the tolls. But they're doing it now that most Black and brown people are being pushed out. Yeah. And so what happened in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s when we were there. So I would say I want to start with cities that have these historical problems. So right after New York City and Baltimore, I want to move on to DC and to LA. And of course, I'm not going to forget Philly because
I was gonna say, don't forget us over here because going through the same exact things.
I know.
Yeah, no, it's real. I grew up in DC as a kid, and it was Chocolate City. And now if you go to First and U, where I used to live, I was shocked. There's illegal seafood and white people jogging down the street, and it's just where are they pushing everybody to? Where can everybody go?
You know what? And in 20 years, they're gonna be pushing them out of there too. When I lived in, I call it Bushwick. They were rebranding it East Williamsburg when I lived there. This is over a decade ago. I had a roommate who was from the Midwest. And she was like, well, Lauren, let me show you New York City. Let me tell you about New York City. And I was like, I was born here. My parents were born here in Queens. Yeah. I grew up in Flushing and Belleville. I know the city. And it was this weird thing that happened where she felt more validated as a New York Cityer than I did, and was like putting her experiences over mine, including our work, right? She was upset that I was a full-time worker getting salary. She's like, why are you getting salary? And
Wow.
the microaggressions are real, and
Yeah.
the disrespect is real. And, I want to create a space where people can get the information they need to make informed decisions and to hold people accountable, right? If I'm meeting with somebody and they love me on the phone and I walk in and they say your credit must be bad, which has happened to me numerous times, I want people to know, as soon as this person saw my face, they said my credit's bad. When they spoke to me on the phone, they said everything was perfect. So what changed between then and now? And that has
Yeah.
been my experience for sure.
Yeah, no, I've definitely had similar experiences. And like you said before, it gets even more complicated with like being queer and all these other things. So it's something that tons of people could benefit from. I'll ask one more question. What do you think folks can do now to kind of organize in their communities and fight back against some of the gentrification and things that's happening? Because I know it's a huge issue. Everybody that I speak to is kind of dealing with this.
Yeah.
So if you have any advice for folks,
Yeah.
let us know.
Yeah. So I mentioned a place in Crown Heights that I lived in. It was actually called Weeksville, and it was one of the first historical
Weeksville
Black.
Heritage Center. I know
Yes,
that's
I was
yeah.
right down the block from there. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I used to be over there.
yeah. Most of the people on the block were homeowners, and they were Black and Caribbean homeowners. And I moved there because I do have Caribbean roots. And my landlord, actually, she was born in a neighborhood and wanted to rent to people that, represented the neighborhood. And one of the things that they did was they were really big on community. They partnered with the police station that was right down the street from us. They partnered with the Heritage Center. They spoke about some of the issues that they were happening. They changed some of the local laws that they were exempt, so they could double park, like we were allowed to double park and like do other things on our block because they were willing to work on, and talk to people. The biggest thing is don't be afraid to share your story. Like the Me Too movement, like the Black Lives Matter movement, regardless of how people feel about it, it was so strong and so powerful because once you share one story, 10 more people share theirs. And then it's hard to ignore if everyone in the room has a similar experience and they're like, hey, we come from two different backgrounds, but we had a horror nightmare story about this, and we're going to hold people accountable. And then another thing is you need to shop locally, contribute to the local culture. You add in your culture. That's what New York is about. It's a melting pot, not a displacement. And for folks that are coming into New York, don't call the cops on your neighbors because they're playing music. All right.
Or the bodega cat.
The bodega cat is there for a reason. I rather bodega cat versus a bodega rat. Okay.
Right? Like the hell?
You need to understand that the fabric of New York has always been integration. And that is something that has made us, such a great city. Any great city, you see that cultural integration. And I think that's the biggest thing. Don't come here trying to recreate your hometown. That's not what it's about. It's about bringing everybody together.
100% respect the space and the people that have been there fighting for the same like issues. They don't even realize a lot of these people, they move into these places. Like where I'm from, upstate, I'll give you a quick story. I'm from Kingston, New York. And during COVID, Kingston, during COVID, it got gentrified as hell, like crazy. Like a 1-bedroom apartment when I was a kid, you could get for like $200. Now it's like $1,800 and above. But what a lot of these people didn't know that were moving up here from New York is they were moving into like legit crack dens. And the landlords weren't renovating anything. They were just charging these prices. And so it's like, yeah, like you come up here thinking you know everything and you want to ignore the locals, but then you end up living in squalor. And it's like to be a community, you have to recognize that there is community that's already been there and they know more than you.
They know more than you, and you should definitely respect it. And I said this to Kingston because I went to school in Oneonta. So we'd have to pass through Kingston. I loved it. So it's beautiful, beautiful town. And then my wife is from Endicott. And so we're both familiar with upstate New York. And,
Nice.
Like the thing about the landlords, what they're doing, and you can also tell in like 2010s construction and on, the reason why it's breaking down is because they would literally put tiles and stuff on top of stuff. And they would put these cheap these cheap walls up, they would take like a whole house and break it up into micro apartments and then charge exuberant rent and then not take care of the infrastructure or the problem. And then you have a clash between the individuals coming in from all over and the individuals that are there. Columbia University and NYU University are perfect examples. I'm not going to say how I personally feel about these two institutions, but there's been a number of instances where we have these young students coming in from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, getting attacked by some of the locals because they just don't know, or they walk around like it's home, and it's like, it's not home.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not trying to blame the victim, but there needs to be some sort of like rectifying understanding that like, you're moving to another place. How do they locals act, and how do they do? Because you need to integrate, and I think that's why people make fun of Americans when they travel, because they don't understand that.
No, Americans are in their own little world. But yeah, 100%. I think that's a huge thing. Columbia for sure is buying up all of Harlem, and it's wild. But yeah, I think that is the only little bit of karma. And I recommend everybody to buy up. What I see now is that a lot of these people were buying these homes in the hood and renovating them, and then they couldn't sell them. So if you go on Trilla and all these websites, you can get some really nice spaces in the hood. So I recommend all my folks go back and buy, now that they've renovated it and it's nice, like go back and buy your spot, because it's wild in way in which people come in and colonize spaces still to this day. But I think the karmic justice of that is that they don't know what they're doing, and we should take advantage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on today and learning about your endeavors. I'm really excited for it to come out. I'm definitely going to use it. I hope to God I'm not renting much longer, because I can't. I can't take this. But
people don't realize too, because I do plan on a web version of it, because a lot of times folks that struggle with mobile apps, and especially the elderly they can struggle with mobile apps, and the web might be easier, is that regardless if you buy, you might end up still renting later on in life.
That's facts.
And and that's something to also take in consideration, because the abuse with senior citizens is even worse, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
I just, I can't solve every problem today, but I hope I can get to the space where I can at least get some, recognition, some sort of peek into that space and help some of those folks, because, we should be taking care of people. I don't know why that's a radical idea, we should be taking care of people, because why not,
100%. Because we're all human and we all have to survive on this planet that we're stuck on. But yeah, 100%. I feel that deeply. I could see like your app expanding to like being accessible to people. Like if you're looking to buy a house and getting the history on that house, or just the neighborhood in general, like it's still valuable information. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out for that. And hopefully everybody listening will too. And we'll have all the links in the show notes and the comment section below, so people can check it out. And you can follow LP on Instagram and TikTok. And yeah, thank you so much for being on today. Really appreciate you.
Yes, having me.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully we'll be hearing more from you soon. To everybody listening, we will be back again next Thursday. Thank you so much. And I hope y'all are doing all right.
Our vibes stay sacred, our roots run deep.